You are listening to the Speech Space Podcast, a podcast full of tips and resources for SLPs. I'm your host, Jessica Cassidy, and this is episode 65. Today, we are going to be talking all about teletherapy. I don't usually post an episode other than on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, but I know that many of you have had questions, and I really wanted to be able to give you some answers. So my friend Leanne from Expressible is going to join us in a minute. But before that, I wanted to tell you about something really exciting. I collaborated with a few teletherapy SLPs, and we are going to be doing a live webinar series starting on Wednesday the 25th and going through Friday the 27th. So it's going to be each night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going to be hopping on live to talk about all things teletherapy and to answer any of your lingering questions. This is totally free, and you can sign up by going to bit.ly/teletherapy webinar. Again, that's bit.ly/teletherapy webinar. And if you're driving for some reason right now and you're not able to write that down, I will link to that in the show notes. So you can pull up the show notes later and grab that link. All right, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by the Digital SLP membership site, which is a site that features time-saving, no print, and low prep resources for SLPs. This time of year, the doors are generally closed to the Digital SLP membership. However, due to the fact that many SLPs were reaching out to me in hopes that they could join, I have temporarily opened the doors back up. You can learn more or sign up by going to thedigitalslp.com/digital SLP. All right, let's go ahead and bring Leanne on the show. Hey, Leanne, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about all things teletherapy. But before we dive in, can you talk a little bit about who you are and what your experience is with teletherapy?
Absolutely. So I was one of those people who went straight from undergrad speech right into grad school speech. And the majority of my experience out in the field was with pediatrics. So I've done early intervention and home health and outpatient clinics, and didn't really jump into teletherapy until we kind of pivoted and we're really looking to solve this problem that I felt like I was feeling constantly out working in those different settings where families I was trying to serve were running into massive speed bumps with insurance companies. And sometimes it really felt like it was at the whim of, the person just deciding they wanted the goal written just the smallest bit differently. And then the family is left submitting all the, appeals, and time goes by and it's wasted. And so I really felt like there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we started Expressible, and that's when we really dove into teletherapy, and we go direct to the client, direct to the family. We work with adults as well. So we're private pay and we don't go through insurance. And so I know a lot of the teletherapy field right now is very geared towards schools and contracting with schools. So we kind of are occupying this different space in going direct to the client. And so it's been great ever since teletherapy. I think before getting into it, I might have been a little bit apprehensive. I think starting out, like coming out of school, we have all these grand ideas about what therapy has to look like and interpersonal social interactions and all these things. And so part of me might have felt like you lose some of that in teletherapy before getting into it, but you really don't. You still form really nice relationships. You can work, social skills are there. It's just like sitting across the table from someone. And so all in all, it's been a great experience with teletherapy.
That's great. That's great. I really like that. It was something that you developed out of your own struggle to try to solve a problem for other people.
Yeah.
So things are changing right now in the world of teletherapy. As of the last week or two, I feel like everything has really changed. I know a lot of SLPs have questions, a lot of SLPs have concerns, maybe even fears about jumping into the world of teletherapy pretty much overnight. What do you have to say to these SLPs?
I think deep breath is is the first part. I absolutely understand their nerves because, like I said before I got into it, I would have apprehension too before trying it out, and so to be kind of forced into making the switch so rapidly, I 100% understand the overwhelmed feeling. If I can help in any way, I would say deep breath and then you've got this. And I mean that in the sense of, we have our clinical skills, we have the experience, and we know what we're doing. It's just maybe a matter of making little tiny tweaks. And I hope that people find that those tweaks really can be small, to take what you were doing in in-person therapy and transitioning it over to teletherapy. um, you know there's all the platform. I know there's a lot of discussion about like what platforms to use. Some therapists are being asked to use specific ones, and there's a lot of conversation going on about HIPAA and FERPA and making sure all of those things are lined up. And that is really tough. I know we're rolling with the punches, and I agree that I kind of feel like we definitely shouldn't let those regulations slide. But it's also a very unusual time. Um, so getting past just the roadblock of the platform that you're using, a lot of the majority of them have at least some kind of screen sharing feature. And so if you have PDF files on your computer, you can screen share them right over to the person and proceed with therapy that way. I know lots of people are being very generous right now about sharing materials that they've created to be used in teletherapy. I'm sure that we're all digging around out there to have all that lined up. Again, it's an unusual time. So if your teletherapy looks a little bit sloppy, as in maybe you're holding papers up to the camera instead of sharing the screen, I'm sure that all the families will understand that we're doing our best. We're maybe achieving a lot of the same goals, even if it doesn't look as pretty as it might in in-person therapy, just by the nature of trying to figure it out on the fly. I think that after a couple sessions, hopefully everyone will find that you can kind of sink into it. You'll slide back into all your clinical skills and knowledge and cueing, and everything will kind of hopefully start to feel just as it does when you're in person.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to give yourself some grace, as you get started, because with anything, I mean, the only way to learn is to get started, right? You have to do it a few times until you start to feel a little bit more comfortable, and you learn that, okay, maybe holding the papers up to the screen isn't going to work as well as sharing a PDF on the screen. I mean, it's not until you do it that you learn that. So I think that's a great place to start. You touched on platforms a little bit. Do you have a specific platform that you like or recommend?
So I use Simple Practice, and I do really like it. I recommend it. It does not have the capability of letting the person on the other side take control of the screen. I know that that's one that maybe a few platforms out there have, and some teletherapists who have been doing it before this moment, they might prefer that for some of their kiddos who can participate in games that way.
Mhm.
But I really find that just the screen sharing is often beneficial enough. My sessions are pretty short; they're 30 minutes, and so I'm someone who doesn't always spend a whole lot of time on like the extra game side of things. Trying to incorporate more as we go. Like doing therapy with and keeping it entertaining as we go rather than taking the breaks and things. But I know that Zoom has a lot of really great features, but and that's one that I think that schools have asked people to try out. But the as far as I know, I'm not sure if any changes have been made since the crisis has started happening, but the free version of Zoom's not HIPAA compliant. And the HIPAA compliant version, it has quite a price tag on it for the monthly fee. I know Therapy Platform's another one that a lot of people enjoy using. There's a lot of great recommendations out there. As far as what I use, we use Simple Practice.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And for those listening about the screen sharing that you were talking about, I think well, there's two things I'm going to say about that. The advantage to that is that your student can click if there's different things, when you turn that screen sharing over, if you're using a PDF file that has clickable elements or say like boom cards or something like that, they can click on that. However, I did talk to an SLP who brought up a good point, and or I guess whatever platform she was using did not have that capability, but she's like, you know what? I like that it doesn't, because then they have to use their language to tell me where to click or what to click. So you're actually kind of getting, you could look at it that way as well. They're getting a little extra practice.
Yeah, definitely you can. And I know a lot of other ways than not screen sharing, like teletherapy in itself kind of creates a natural barrier task for following directions, using things like that. You're both maybe drawing a picture on the other side and then showing to see if it matches. So there's a lot of things that kind of come inherent to it. And that's a good point. That's another thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How steep would you say if there's somebody listening who's like, I'm just not tech savvy at all, how steep would you say that learning curve is? I mean, do you think like 3-4 sessions in, you really start to pick it up, or do you think it takes a little bit longer?
I think 3 or 4 sessions in, I think it's pretty easy to pick up, especially if ahead of time, if you familiarize yourself just a little bit with how the system works. Again, giving ourselves some grace. There's gonna be glitches. Maybe the audio doesn't work on their side. You have to close out the screen, try it again. When that happens, like, we always just take it in stride. Usually that's a first session kind of thing, and then we smooth it over. That might happen first session with each family, but once each family has got it down, we smooth it over, and then from there it goes fine. So I think after a few sessions and the main elements that you're using, some of them have a lot of bells and whistles, the platforms, but you definitely can get a handle on the main features that you're using, I think, pretty quickly, even if you're not if you wouldn't call yourself the most tech savvy. And if not, then I just encourage you to keep trying, keep exploring it in between sessions, and just keep doing your best. I know that it feels overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like right now it's a good time because there's so many people creating tutorials and blog posts. And so I feel like there's all this additional information. So I think there's more than usual in terms of resources that are out there for us to look up and find to kind of help guide us to get started.
Definitely. And it's amazing. Kudos to everyone in the SLP community for being so generous of sharing and everything.
Yeah, it's been really amazing to kind of watch it all unfold on social media and see everybody come together. Let's talk a little bit about the effectiveness of teletherapy versus face-to-face therapy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, teletherapy, ASHA has had it as an approved service delivery model since 2005, but it's definitely the last decade has more been where people are starting to research it more and more to double check its effectiveness. And I think there are some caveats when we're looking at the research. There's not a lot out there quite yet about, working on certain diagnoses, and we can guess which ones would be those ones. So AAC, if we have more severe disabilities, if we have a child who has maybe more significant autism where attending to the computer is difficult, or if you have the facilitator on the other side of the screen, whether it's, during school time, if it's a member of the staff or a special education teacher, if it's at home, parent or caregiver, it can be kind of tricky to take maybe our training and help facilitate for them to be able to do the teletherapy effectively with those more significant disabilities. Dysphagia is another one where I think that's still evolving. But as far as a lot of other diagnoses goes, voice disorders, articulation, phonological, language disorders, social skills, and pragmatics, teletherapy, the research has shown that teletherapy is often just as efficacious. And a lot of times they do surveys about satisfaction, and patient and parent satisfaction is often higher because of I think the convenience level that we have playing out there. So if they don't have to drive in traffic for an hour both ways to get to the therapy clinic, that is just such a bonus that they're happy to jump on with the teletherapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to actually ask a little bit about the parents and what kind of feedback you've gotten from parents about the sessions. I mean, is that kind of what you're hearing, that they're happy to save on the driving? What else do you hear? What kind of feedback do you hear from them?
Yeah, we hear a lot of feedback about the convenience factor. And I think it is huge because in some other cases you might be looking at, well, it's just too hard to fit it in, speech, it's too hard to get speech therapy done, and so it falls by the wayside. But when you add this convenience factor, because those families, very often they want to get it done, so when you add the convenience factor, really, I think it helps them feel really great about the fact that they are getting it done. And a lot of our families love, I think, the involvement and getting to be involved. If you're talking about the younger populations, I know there's been a couple of therapists asking, well, how does it work with those really teeny tiny tots, the early intervention ages? If it's through the computer, don't we not want them hanging out on computers and tablets all day long? And I find that the parent coaching and parent education model actually works really well with teletherapy. It's sort of a forcing function for that age group where they have to be the ones to try out those strategies. And then we're doing, modeling on our side, maybe interacting with the kiddo a little bit here and there, modeling with tools that we have on our side of the camera. But then when it comes time to try it out, the parent's the one trying it. We're supporting them through it. And then they are going to leave that session feeling so ready to continue trying that strategy throughout the entire day. And school age kids and their parents, same thing. Parents will very often sit alongside the kiddo in the session to keep them on. Maybe they just were there to keep them on track, but they end up learning all about the cues. We can engage with them a lot more. I usually set up the expectation for, the younger, like kinder, pre-K, 6, 7-year-olds, that I really want the parents there with me no matter what we're working on, so that they can stay involved. Once the kids start to get a little bit older, I might give them more autonomy with being the ones who are interfacing the whole time, and then just looping the parents back in the way that we might in a typical therapy session, But so for the most part, the feedback we get is great about the teletherapy. They love being involved. They love the convenience. So yeah.
Yeah, I love the added involvement piece, because I think sometimes that can be such a struggle, not having, especially in the school settings, not always having that communication that you would like with the parents. So to have them there and to kind of have them see the goals that you're working on and some of the strategies that you're using, I can see how that would be really beneficial. Now, what about the kids? So we've talked about some of the perks of teletherapy for the parents, the convenience factor. What about for the kids? And whenever you're doing teletherapy versus a face-to-face session, what are you finding is kind of like a perk of doing teletherapy for them?
I think most kids these days, they're used to technology. And so they are usually pretty excited to jump on board with it. I think if they are not some students and some clients I work with are already maybe doing some kind of online learning. And so they're used to it in that sense. If it's a kiddo who is not used to any kind of online learning, then it's sort of novel and new, and it's fun that it's sort of like this FaceTime Skype call, but with your teacher. And, she incorporates all these activities, things like that. So the kids usually take pretty well to it, and they're not as nervous probably as parents and maybe therapists are to jump in on it, because they're just very familiar with technology. Sometimes the little ones, it goes kind of the same as it does if you're working in person, where they have to warm up to you. They might need to warm up to the fact that you're talking to them through a screen. But, I would say that that's sort of just the same as in person. When you meet a kiddo for the first session, they don't know who you are, and they got to spend some time getting to know you. So a lot of aspects feel pretty similar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because you have to develop that rapport regardless of whether you're in person or speaking online. Okay. Can we switch gears and talk a little bit about doing assessments online? I know that's something that a lot of SLPs have questions about, what that looks like and what do you use and how do you do it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of fantastic resources out there. Q Global and Q Interactive from Pearson are, as far as I've understood from the community as a whole, probably the main way that teletherapists are getting assessments done. Currently, we're using non-standardized assessments. So just because we're private pay, we are using we're doing language sampling and analysis, fluency samples, articulation screeners, and building our goals from there. And, same with our adult clients as well. There are some therapists who are big fans of document cameras. And so that would be when you have like an external camera that looks down at your page. I would describe it sort of like the overhead screens that we remember from school, where the teacher would write on it. And so some will use those for the stimulus. And I think that a lot of, definitely, again, the parent involvement is going to come into play there. So when you have the older school age kids and they're able to respond to some of those stimulus items with the numbers in the corner of the pictures, if it's instead of pointing, but we might also loop in parents for the younger age group if we're double checking comprehension items. We might rely on the parent to help us determine if that one was, if they pointed to the correct one or the incorrect one. If it's following directions on the self, we can, again, kind of double check with the parents. If we're doing non-standardized measures, we can see through the screen if they followed the direction. So yeah, I think that it's something that's still kind of evolving, and the test makers are probably going to be getting into it more and more for getting everyone set up with those resources. But I believe the main ones right now are the Q Global, I think, is the big one. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes in case anybody wants to go and check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and talk about behavior for a little bit. What if you do have a student who is having a really hard time attending? What are some strategies that you can implement to try to help with behavior management?
So I'm a big fan of visual trackers. I think it's always helpful to have those kids have an understanding of when this is going to end. There will be an endpoint. Sometimes they might feel like, again, the same kind of trouble that we have in person. It's very valuable for them to know that this is a finite time. We have these goals that we're going to get done. And then, if we're talking about working with a kiddo at home, and if they're having behavior trouble, I very often am going to loop in the parent and talk to them about, okay, let's all talk together about what might be something that we are working for today. What is going to be our reinforcer? And of course, I want to clear it with the parents, because I'm not going to offer something that they're not willing for the kiddo to have. I'm not going to offer them a whole piece of cake if parents don't want them to have a whole piece of cake. So looping parents in to talk about what are they working for, because I think, no matter what, you might have a kiddo who in person or on teletherapy is kind of that kiddo that needs some kind of encouragement to make it through the work if they're not quite finding it engaging enough. But I would also encourage staying creative and staying flexible with swapping tasks. So if they are just not having that goal today, switch to the next one. Try to see if you can work on something else and find it more engaging for them. Take a break and see if maybe they're interested, especially, right now, I think we're talking about everyone being at home versus at school. Take a break. Maybe they have something around the house that they want to talk to you about, that they want to show you. Do they want to show you their favorite toy? Where is their pet right now? Can they tell you about what their pet looks like, what it's doing, your favorite snack in the kitchen? So kind of re-engaging them and giving them a chance to talk about what's in their environment, as opposed to, hey, look at this over here, focus on this screen, kind of letting them settle back in to their environment a little bit more. And then if we're talking about more significant behaviors, of course, then we really will need the facilitator, quote unquote. And so if it's family member, we'll really work hard to include the coaching and education on their part that helps them feel confident about jumping in to help out with the behavior, and all the strategies that we would use, coaching them through those. So we have our visual cues over here, but sorry about that. They are being coached through helping with those strategies as well.
Okay, great. Do you feel like parents are generally pretty good facilitators, or do you feel like you need to provide some sort of kind of training to them prior to, or do you feel like they do a pretty good job kind of jumping in and doing what you need them to do?
Well, I think it depends on the family, and I would say definitely the training is going to be helpful no matter what. And so sometimes you won't need it, but sometimes, I think that I'd love to say that parents are always 100% intuitive on what to do, but of course we know that they don't always come to the table with the background knowledge that we come with. So sharing that, setting the expectations up front, especially if we're jumping in with a kiddo who's not used to teletherapy, they're used to in-person therapy at school or in a clinic. Setting the expectations up in that first session that you have together about, this is going to be different. I won't be there to do all the things that I normally do. So I might need your help to keep us on track. And so here's a reminder about a lot of the strategies that I use. And I'll help, I'll let you know when I might need you to help jump in to enact that strategy. So I think that coaching, at least upfront a little bit with everyone, is good. And then as things arise, providing more and more support. So giving, I like to give some benefit of the doubt at first and just give that little bit of the coaching. And then, keep going as if issues arise.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of starting with that for everybody and kind of setting the tone. And then, if you need to go back in and have some extra training, then you can. But I like the idea of kind of putting it all out there before you even get started.
Yeah.
What are some common tech issues that arise? And then how do you handle them whenever they come up?
So I would say the two most common would be the internet connection, and then the audio is usually the most common. And like I said, that, typically those audio issues might come up in the first session, but then as we move forward, we become familiar with the flow. So does the family, and we know how things need to be set up in order for it to be successful. I know that the internet connection, that's something that's really coming up as a barrier right now, because a lot of kids who we're trying to do the teletherapy with, all of a sudden, they might not have the best internet connection. And so that, that's a challenge I'm really not I'm really not sure what everyone's doing about it as far as the realm of school students goes. I think our hearts are breaking and trying to provide for them the best that we can and provide for everyone with a lot of equity. I think every independent school district is looking at what all of this means as far as not only the curriculum, but the additional services. So in our case, when we're getting set up with a family, that's a question that we ask in the consultation, is about whether or not the internet connection will be strong enough. And if it's not, that's when we're going to be, ethical and upfront and say, telehealth might not be the best option. Then let's try to find a resource for an in-person clinic nearby or an in-person resource nearby. If, upgrading the internet is not a possibility.
Mm-hmm. So what is that internet connection that's recommended to kind of optimize the experience?
I actually don't know the exact number. That's a fantastic question. I don't know what the optimal speed is. Maybe I'd be happy to research it and then send it over for you to include in the info.
Okay, sure. Great. Thank you. Let's see. I was going to also ask you if you have any recommendations for like really neat websites or apps that you can use during your sessions to keep students engaged.
Yeah, well, I know everyone is talking about being big fans of the boom cards right now. Those are awesome, especially if you have the screen sharing function where you continue to operate it. That's still engaging. If you have the sharing function where they can take over the mouse, a couple of the cards will have interactive things to do, like in minimal pair discrimination, moving the picture to the right, jar, the right location. So the boom cards are awesome. I love those. We do a lot of the early intervention stuff. So that focus stays on playing in the environment that they're in, and not so much with any kind of interactive app or game. And then, yeah, like I said, I don't spend a whole lot of our extra time, again, since we're private pay, so we're trying to get we're trying to get families the biggest bang for their buck. So we don't spend a whole lot of time on it. But as far as the resources go, I use a lot from ReadWorks for passage comprehension and reading stimuli for working on anything with sounds or fluency, things like that. And Home Speech Home, if we have a kiddo who has moved off of needing picture stimuli and can just go with the words. Those are some of my most frequent ones that I pull up and have ready to go. But again, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of recommendations on the game side of it. Just since we don't spend a whole ton of time on those.
Yeah, no, I like the recommendations for the Home Speech Home. I know the word lists there are great. And boom cards are also a really great recommendation. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you talked about how with EI, you're going to be having them kind of in more of a play environment. Can you talk about the differences of structuring a session for, let's do in 3 groups. So let's say like EI versus elementary versus kind of older, like middle school, high school.
Yeah.
How would you structure those sessions differently?
So I will try to, for EI, I'll try to loop the parent in ahead of time if I have the opportunity to say, or I try to get it set up in one session for the next session, making recommendations about what we might want to have ready to go, what kind of activity we might want to bring in. So then that's really helpful because that helps parents feel prepared. It helps them know what kind of goal we're going to be focused on, since the biggest part of it is the parent coaching and engagement for the strategies and cues. And that session, if we've picked one activity or 2 activities, we know what we're going to work on. And same thing there, where the parent coaching model, where you are explaining the strategy, modeling it either with things on your end or if the kiddo will kind of engage with you across the camera for enough seconds to try out a model. And then the parent tries it and we coach them through that. So going through that flow throughout activities. If we're talking about some early sound development, same thing there, coaching the parents on strategies, but maybe we'll pull up a couple picture cards, or if they have any kind of books that are their favorites, we can practice with, that slightly increased amount of structure that way. But looking at school age kids, again, I love to set up the structure up front. So visual schedules or just any kind of a schedule so that the kiddo knows what's going on and the parent will know as well. If there's resources that I, want the parent to have, want the kiddo to have ahead of time, if we're going to be working on certain pictures, maybe we'll send those over in the document. But if we have this screen sharing and it's the first time they're seeing it, we can pull it up, share the screen. And then if we want them to practice that when the session's done, then you can send that over. So either way on that one. And, same thing, like I said, our sessions are short. So the schedule might look like, the first goal, a break where we maybe talk, chat or talk about something in their house, talk about something going on. Again, just keeping language involved as much as possible. And then another activity. And usually, 30 minutes flies by in any setting, and I kind of feel like it flies by pretty fast in teletherapy. So, quick break in the middle, maybe if you have a kiddo who's able to make it through the whole session, and then just work for that break at the end, structuring it that way. And then the middle school and high school aged students and clients, I pretty much try to fill that whole 30 minutes with work or conversation, language time. I might give them if they're a kiddo who needs the visual schedule, we can definitely still do that. But I might just lay it out verbally for them up front. And then same thing, just working through our goals one at a time, the way that we would in in-person therapy.
Great. I really like how you broke that down, because I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people, especially those who are having caseloads with that wide age range.
Yeah.
So before you wrap up, are there any other tips or pieces of advice that you'd like to give to SLPs who are just getting started with teletherapy?
I think my advice would be kind of the same as in the beginning, just reminding everyone that you've got this. And SLPs are, I think, known for being flexible, because we have to be flexible in any given session. I think from what I've seen out there, everyone is really stepping up to the plate and ready to jump in feet first on this, even though it feels overwhelming to have to do it overnight. And I think look at it as adding, a new skill to your toolbox. Now you'll be able to say you have this experience, whether or not you love it and want to continue with it. I think that's important too. You might not love it. It might not be for you. I know everyone will do their best if that's the circumstance that we're dealing with. And everyone's going to bring all their clinical skills to the table, all their creativity, all their patience. And so I think I would recommend just giving yourself a lot of positive affirmations for everything that you do bring to the table. Even if this thing is new and we're on a learning curve that's pretty steep, you're automatically off on a good foot because of everything that you knew prior to this tough moment.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I also like how you said that, this might not be your thing. It doesn't have to work for everyone. You don't have to stick with it forever, but, give it your best go and be positive about it. Because this is where we are right now. This is our reality, right? So yeah. Okay. Can you tell everyone how they can find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can send any questions or anything to info@expressible.io. Expressible is expressable.io. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can if someone has anything else about telepractice. They can check out our website. We have a couple great blogs up there. Again, that would just be www.expressible.io, and we're on Facebook and Instagram as a lot of us are. So definitely feel free to reach out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all of your experience and words of wisdom with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope that people find it helpful.